Hello, welcome to Chapter 3 Podcast, the show for readers of science fiction, fantasy, and romance. This is season 3, episode 4, and continuing with our 2023 Witcher Readalong, we are discussing Sword of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski, the second short story collection before we get into the full-length novels. And this was a new one for me.
I was gonna say they're all new after Last Wish for you, right?
Yes. Yep. That is as far as I had gotten previously. So, but I enjoyed this quite a lot, actually.
What did you rate?
4.5.
What did you rate Last Wish?
That's a good question. What did I rate Last Wish? I think the first time I read it, it was a 4, and I think I bumped it up, but I can't remember if it was a 4.5 or a 5. So I have to look. But it was funny, that one had kind of a framing device, whereas this doesn't. It's just a series of stories.
Yes, that is correct.
Which I wasn't necessarily expecting. It was kind of interesting. I gave The Last Wish 4.5 stars on reread. So yeah, same rating, I guess.
Same rating. I gave The Last Wish 5 stars both times that I read it, and I gave Sword of Destiny 4 stars both times that I read it.
Okay.
So clearly, I hated it.
Clearly.
That's what that means.
It was the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed this, and I thought it did some interesting things. This time I actually wrote down what all of the stories were and like a note of what they were about so I could actually remember all of them, which I did not do with the first one, so yay me.
I have sirens passing now, of course.
Of course. So we're gonna talk, I guess, sort of spoiler-free thoughts initially, and then we'll dive into a spoiler discussion. And then we're thinking because we do bonus content for patrons for all of our episodes. So for this episode's bonus content, we're going to be discussing monstrousness in folklore and fairy tales in The Witcher and in other things, which should be fun. So if you want to toss a coin to your podcasters, you can join us on Patreon. The link is below. I see I worked it in that time, Leanne. Thank you.
I'm very proud. I'm very proud.
Thank you. Should be. So hello, everybody. I see we've got some people joining us tonight. Hopefully this will be fun. Feel free to chime in with your thoughts on this. How did you feel about this? You clearly liked the first one, the first collection, better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not because of the framing narrative, but I think the first one, it works better as like isolated episodes that like are they are introducing things for this larger story in this world and getting you acquainted with things that are become important for the main series. They still feel more like these kind of like isolated adventures that you can read, kind of like these are like separate though connected stories, whereas Sword of Destiny feels like it's like in this weird limbo because we're not in the main series yet, but it doesn't really feel like isolated stories in the same way. Like it is, they're building off each other. They're building off of Last Wish. Like they feel so enmeshed in everything else right now. So then it's just like very strange to have it still structured kind of as short stories where I'm like, but you're not though.
Yeah, it's interesting because it feels more like an anthology than a thought out collection, if that makes sense. Almost as if he had sort of written these separately, tying together and then put them. What is happening?
My cat started playing with the cord that's my camera,
no.
and there's sirens outside, and then like I threw something so she'd run and get it, so then she like did, but then like almost knocked over my old computer, and the sirens are getting louder. It's a very professional
a
filming studio here.
Very, very professional here. We're doing great. Yes, indeed. Dirty paws at work. Thank you. Thank you, Ursula. Oh my gosh. So I did think it was interesting because I know the first collection, The Last Wish, is very much fairy tale retellings. And I knew this wasn't going to be, but there are still some nods to fairy tales that are getting subverted, which I thought was fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, Sword of Destiny feels like it's really like smack dab between like they always talk about mutants, right, in this series, and it feels like this like
Hmm.
mutant half child between like the main series and the short stories from Last Wish. Because it's like we're still kind of trying to do these short stories, still kind of doing some fairy tale retellings, but like mostly it's like I want to get to the main series already. So I'm basically gonna start the main series, but like pretend like I'm telling short stories. And it's just kind of this like frustrating Kaz. This is frustrating limbo.
Kaz is on a roll tonight. Yeah, I mean I think that's fair. I don't think as a collection it stands together quite as strong, but I did really enjoy all of the stories for different reasons, and I do think that it gives us more insight into who Geralt is, his relationship with Yen, and um, we get Ciri introduced. So there's a lot that happens in this book, and I feel like we understand the characters in the world a lot more.
Sirens.
Oh no. It's a busy night in,
It's
Los
complete
Angeles.
chaos. I swear it's been pretty quiet today because like we've been having a lot of rain lately, so it's just like no one's out and about. But the rain did stop, so
So
great.
people are trying to drive and don't know how.
Yeah, I don't know what my
Yeah.
cat's problem is. Yeah, like I said, like that's why I give it 4 stars because I do still enjoy it, and like this is it is doing a that's why it's also not skippable, because like it's doing a lot to set up what we're gonna get in the main series. It doesn't entice
Yes.
for that. But that's what it feels like a chapter sampler, you know? It feels like it's just kind of like teasing you with some like here's what's gonna be a thing in the main series. So yeah, I just find it like structurally kind of frustrating, and that's why I have to dock it a star.
Yeah, which is, fair. I can't tell if things are slow on my side or your side. People tell us in the comments, but I'm gonna, like, prioritize my computer on our internet in case it's me.
Everything seems fine from from my end. Maybe
Okay.
Kaz is
Alright.
sabotaging us.
It may be Kaz. It is entirely possible. So how do you want to approach this? I mean, I feel like because we could just go story by story for this one, there aren't as many as there were in The Last Wish. Do you wanna
There's more sirens now, lady. Sure, if that's what you
Good,
want
good.
to
Okay, let's do that, and in the meantime, let's look at our comments section on YouTube. Ursula says, "I really wish they'd done the audios with a full cast of the people from Witcher 3." Oh, okay, like the video game. That's an interesting idea. I do think the audios are good. It is funny to me though that also the reason you can't hear the sirens is because Leanna is muting herself so that you can't hear the sirens. But I do think it's funny that in The Last Wish they called it was we had Dandelion in the audiobook, and in this one it's Dandelion, so they can't seem to make a decision as to how we're going to
Yeah, well,
pronounce
the
his
first
name.
time the first time I read these books, I read The Last Wish physically, and then the first audio I did was Sword of Destiny, where
Mhm.
he was Dandelion. And I then thereafter he's Dandelion again forever. And so I had thought that he would just been Dandelion for the first two. I didn't realize that
Oh,
in Last
weird.
Wish he was Dandelion because like I started at Sword of Destiny and he was Dandelion and then
Mhm.
it changed. So like it feels even stranger that it changes twice instead of like
Yeah.
Dandelion up until we decide no Dandelion. It's like Dandelion, Dandelion, Dandelion. Like, ugh, what the
That's
heck?
so interesting. I wonder if they just got somebody different for this audiobook, or I don't know what happened there. Weird. Matt says, "Turns out self-aware monstrosities struggling with destiny is my thing." Who knew? Fair enough. Yeah. Okay, so the first story is The Bounds of Reason, and this was one that I know was in the Witcher show, but I couldn't really remember what happened until after it happened, and I was like, "Oh, right, that was the thing." This was the one with the golden dragon, and we get a lot of information about Yennefer and her infertility, which I thought was really interesting. I feel like I really like her as a character because she is, yeah, like people think she's hot, but there's a lot more to her than that. And I feel like her characterization is pretty nuanced. And this infertility issue of like what she had to give up to become a sorceress and what she's willing to sacrifice to try to get that back ends up being really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about sexism in this series, or in these books last time, and I mean, Dandelion or Dandelion or Yasky or whatever you want to call him is much more of a caricature than most of the female characters. Like Yennefer's not a caricature. Ciri is not. Triss Marigold, I don't think we saw her yet. Did we? Yeah. So Triss Marigold, like, there's a lot of female characters, and I don't think any of them are caricatures. And then the main male character is Geralt, and there are other male characters, but I just feel like there's like
Right.
a lot more females and a lot more females that are not like just throwaway caricatures.
Yeah, no, I think they're handled pretty well and they're interesting. I really like Yennefer as a character. I mean, I know she's, not
I think
always the
Yennefer
best, but
I think Yennefer is like she's like can form a club with Sabitha and Denna from
yeah.
the Gentleman Bastards and the King Killer Chronicle of like the female that like our main male character is obsessed with and that
Mhm.
readers are like, "Oh, why?"
Which is funny because I feel like I always end up liking those characters, even though apparently that's an unpopular opinion, but I
Whereas I
really like
tend to just
Yennefer.
not mind them. I'm like,
Yeah,
I wouldn't be in love with them, but I don't need to be in love with them.
because they are, and that's really what matters. Yeah, I find her an interesting character.
The thing that does drive me nuts throughout these books is how many times we get to hear about her scent being lilac and gooseberries. It's like, is it? You haven't mentioned in a page.
I don't know that I noticed too much. Yeah, we have somebody
Well, now
saying
you
Yen is
will.
terrible. I don't You know what I think is interesting with all of these women and is I feel like people get angry sometimes that they care more about themselves than about the men who are in love with them. I think that rubs people the wrong way, but I find it compelling. I don't know.
I mean, that certainly might be part of it, but I feel like the reason that this is Sabitha, Yennefer, and Denna is not really that so much as it is because of how obsessed the male main character is. So it makes
Mm,
it's like higher pressure on it's like, well, if she's like that amazing that like above all other women of all time ever, like through the ages, songs should be sung. It's like, well, she better freaking live up. And then you're like, everyone's like, no woman character could ever live up to like
but
that
that's
kind of
not but well,
idolization.
yeah, but, like, that's not what love is anyway. I mean, I
No,
don't
but because
know.
the book set them all up as,
Right.
like, the one and only, the
Yeah.
OMG, like, that's why people are like, "Okay, the bar is raised," and I don't agree that they meet this new higher bar, you know?
Yeah. I just don't think they have to. It's like, that's not how things like that
Yeah,
work,
well, that's
but,
why for me,
you know.
it's like, I agree, I would not be obsessed with them. However, it does not bother me because I
Mhm.
am not obsessed, but I am not Geralt. So, like, the story's not about me. He's obsessed, and it's important to his character that he is obsessed. Like,
Yeah.
almost no one is understands why someone else is in love with, like, the person they're in love with. Like, it's, like, their
Mhm.
thing, you know? So, like
Yeah. Yep. That's true. Urza says she dumped a bath full of water on a poor passerby just because she felt like it, yet is straight up mean. I mean, I and maybe this is a me thing, but I find it very satisfying to read about women like her because maybe because of growing up being expected to be nice all the time and feeling like you're supposed to be just because you're a woman. And so even though, I mean, like I do try to be kind to people, but also I find it very satisfying in fiction to read about women who are not nice. I don't
Yeah.
know, but
Like I that's what I said. Like I don't really like Yennefer. I don't dislike Yennefer. I think she's interesting to read about. Just like I
yeah.
think Geralt is interesting. Like Geralt is not a nice person either. Geralt does some questionable things. It's interesting to read
Hmm.
about.
Yeah.
I personally think that Yennefer, like the parts about Yennefer that bother me are less oh she did a mean thing, because like yeah she
Hmm.
does, she can be petty, she can be whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's less that and more just that like I just find her kind of dull in terms of like when they like are talking to each other, like conversations with Yennefer. It's like
Hmm.
who she is, the choices she's made, the position she is in life, like these things are interesting about her, but just like literally just like talking to her, like
Hmm.
it's just like a snooze fest to me. Like whenever she and Geralt are having conversations together, I'm just like a newborn babe. Like, like don't care about whatever. Because she's like, she'll be talking about some like elven stories that she's obsessed with, and like kind of like when we like strip away all of that and we like are like the theme that we're trying to address here with this conversation might be interesting, but like the actual conversation is just like I don't know. I'm just like blah blah blah. Like lilac and gooseberries, elven tales, you're amazing, blah blah blah. Like, I don't care.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean I wouldn't say that their conversations are riveting, but I'm not bothered by them. It's fine. They're fine. But yeah, I think she's an interesting character. Okay, so with the bounds of reason with the whole dragon thing, are we going to talk how do we want to handle spoilers, I guess?
Sirens.
Oh, good, sirens.
There's usually sirens in my area, but like right tonight, they're like all
They're
passing like directly
everywhere.
outside my window because like they're loud enough to be heard even when they're like a street over, but they're like passing right outside of my apartment.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah. So, well, I mean, the first story, like, is it? It felt the longest. Is it the longest?
I'm not sure, but it did feel on the longer end.
It feels like it's like
For
the
sure.
entire book. I'm like, are there more stories in here?
There are a few.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it
Um,
was an interesting
it's
one.
quite long. Yeah.
So what we're saying second book in the series spoilers should be a given. Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, we can do spoilers. Jessica says I like Yen because she sees through the BS. She's lived a disabled life and now she's not, but she still lives through with that life experience. I doubt the author meant for that to come through. Yeah. No, I mean, I see what you're saying. Spoil away. Yeah, all right. Well, I had forgotten that the golden dragon was a shapeshifter.
3 jackdaws.
Yeah, three jackdaws. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right." I was like, "I know I saw this in the show, but it's been a minute." And so I didn't remember what happened. So, but I thought that was kind of I I don't know, it was interesting.
Well, I think it's also it having a story where it's like even the monster hunter is like, well, these monsters are real, but that one, ha ha ha, that's obviously myth and legend. Those don't
Right.
exist, you nincompoop. Like that's like
Mhm.
done in a lot of stories where like just like as a joke, where it's like we've accepted it's like a story about vampires and werewolves, and somebody's like, what about
Right.
fairies? And they're like, fairies? Ha, don't make me
No.
laugh. Like
There's no way. Yeah.
yeah, and so then,
Yeah.
like, we have that where, like, Geralt is like, "Sure, there's dragons, but golden dragons, pah,
Golden
people
dragon.
just
What?
wishing and dreaming." So, like,
Mhm.
it's, having the twist that, like, "Oh, actually, there is a golden dragon." It's like, they could just leave it at that, but the fact that
Mhm.
the fact that it's a shapeshifter is the reason why you would not know that they're real. Why, like, you
Right.
would continue on thinking that, like, that's just a myth
Right.
because they would just shapeshift and you would not know.
Yep. And he's got his ladies along with him. He's quite a character.
He is indeed. And then there's the whole conversation of like, why would you turn into a man if you're a woman, like the dragon? Like when
Mhm.
she takes human form, she's 3 jackdaws, the dude. And
Oh,
there's the whole
yeah.
conversation about dragon kind finding men repulsive, but like she doesn't really.
Yeah, I don't know if it's trying to say something about gender, but I just kind of it was I'm not sure what. It was it was interesting though. I liked him explaining the bit about how the color of the dragons were off and all that. I'm not sure specifically what this is referring to, but I did. Oh, do you mean the idea that like the green dragons are actually gray? Because that I thought was kind of entertaining. That they're technically green dragons, but they look gray. Yeah, exactly. Green dragons are not really green. Yeah, that was. Many things are apparently not what they're said to be or what they seem.
Although, I mean, we do that. Like, um, what I always forget because like it's different in Latvian. But what do you call the cabbage that's not green? What color do you say that it is?
Red,
Okay, yeah,
but
and
it's
red
not
cabbage
red.
is
It's
not
like
red.
purple. It's
And in
purple.
Latvian,
Yeah.
it's blue cabbage. And the reality is, it's blue mixed with red is the actual color of that cabbage. It's
Mhm.
purple.
Mhm. Yep. That's yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, I think those were pretty much like my notes on that was golden dragon shapeshifter, yen infertility. I feel like that was the big thing. And it seems to jump around in timelines because at that point Yennefer and Geralt are not in a good place with each other and then we sort of jump back to I guess earlier when they are together. I don't know. I'm not sure where the timeline of these stories fits.
Yeah, that's why the show was like, people were like, how are you going to do this? And then they like tried to make it more linear, but also didn't. And it just
Yeah.
made it even messier.
It was a little confusing.
But I mean,
Yeah.
it does usually like give us like a um even like it throws you into some random part of the timeline, but it's very clear from how they talk like why he and Jennifer are at odds. They'll like
Mhm.
say enough to where you're like, oh, okay, so they were living together and then he left and then like that pissed her off somehow. So
Right.
like it gives you information
Yeah. It's just they're out of order. I don't know why that was the choice, but
to keep it spicy.
I guess so. I guess that is the main thing about this is the arrangement of the stories in this book does feel kind of random.
I mean, it feels pretty random in the Last Wish as well.
Yeah, I guess so. But at least there's that's why I do like that it has kind of a central story that is tying everything together
In the Last Wish,
in The Last Wish.
the like framing
The
narrative.
framing narrative, yeah, because it makes it feel a little bit more cohesive, whereas this is just kind of throw this here and there.
Yeah. I think part of maybe the reason why it does that, I don't know how successful it is because of how much in general the series wants to talk about fate and destiny and things like that. And so by showing you
Mm,
things out of order makes you like if you just told it linearly, you wouldn't necessarily see the threads of fate. But when you know the
mm,
future and now we jump back and you're like, "Oh, this is why later this became a thing." So then you can like identify the paths of fate because you've seen the outcome, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense. I think, yeah, that's interesting because we definitely get several a few different characters where we're meeting them at different periods or different moments that seem significant and yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
just in the way that Siri is introduced,
Right.
like I think we have that out of order for a reason, so that
Hmm.
when we do jump back in time, we have the foreknowledge to recognize what's happened in that
Right.
earlier story.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, anything else on the first story?
I felt like we had moved on from the first story
Okay,
already.
great. I just wanted to make sure. So number 2 was a shard of ice. So I think we're jumping back in time with this. Yennefer and Geralt are together, but then Estreth, her other lover, shows up and like he wants to fight Geralt over her, and then she leaves them both.
I remember the first time I read that story, I was so certain that when he's like, so then we meet tomorrow, right? There is no other way. We have to meet, right? We have to do this. We have to blah, blah, blah. And Geralt keeps going, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Like, I was so sure that Geralt would just ghost him and be like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't play by your rules. Geralt,
Mhm.
Yennefer's her own person. But then he did show up. But then he kind of did what I expected was to be like, no, I don't play by your rules. Like, I was like, Geralt, what are you doing? What are you doing right now?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think to me it makes sense that Yen was just sort of like, yeah, no, okay, bye. I'm doing other things. I don't know, because she is not the kind of person who's going to be possessed by somebody. I'm like, why are you fighting over her? Like, no
Well,
one's
they're
gonna
like,
win her.
what's his name? That's what he says too. Was his name not Geralt, the other dude? Um,
Estreth.
yep, that guy. The names in this series are a lot.
They are.
Um,
I wrote it down.
yeah. But he's like, so we have to fight. That's non-negotiable. But we also both understand that as soon as we do fight, we've both lost her, and neither of us can have her because once we've like killed the other one, she won't want either of us. So it's
Right.
just like men
What's the
are.
point? Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Well, like why is it this all or nothing sort of thing? And I think that's the thing. Like Geralt is able to just sort of live in that gray space with her, whereas Estreth is like, no, she must be mine, or there must be nothing. And I think that's something. But
There's also like a it's not like the same thing as playing with timelines, but like in that story, we hear the way he insults Geralt and the way that Geralt is mad about being insulted. But then when he goes to talk to Yennefer, he parrots those same insults and is talking about himself. And Yennefer is like, "No,
Mhm.
you're all wrong. That's not true." Um, what do you think of like what do you think the story was trying to do by doing that?
That specifically, um, I I don't know. I think maybe it's something about him projecting his own insecurities onto other people. I
But he's talking about himself. Like, if boyfriend man is like, you're a mutant, you have no feelings, therefore, even talking to you about your feelings is a moot point because you do not have them, and you have to agree with me about this because you know that it is true. And whatever you
right.
consider to be feelings is just like some like vestigial structure. And Geralt is like, screw you, you don't know anything about me, you don't have any right to talk about my feelings. But then he goes to
Right.
talk to Yennefer, and Yennefer is like, whatever, and he's like, what, I have no feelings, I'm a mutant, I'm not
Oh,
capable of
right, right, right,
feelings.
right, 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 right.
And it's literally he's
And
just parroting what he just heard as insults. And it's like, I can't tell, honestly, reading that, if we're meant to think that Geralt is internalized this and does feel this way, or if he's just like looking for validation. He's like, I know that's not true. I know, I'm gonna say it, I'm gonna pout about it, and then have Yennefer be like, no, baby, that's not true. You do have feelings, because that's a little bit how it read to me, but I'm not sure I was meant to read it that way.
I I took it as, as much as to Estreth, he doesn't want to admit it, that is a fear he has, and that he was kind of triggered by that to a certain extent, and is like,
Geralt the
yeah, good
snowflake.
point. I mean, like like, okay, but
He
really,
can't be
Yen, why
triggered,
are you
Bethany.
with
He
me?
doesn't have feelings. It's not possible to trigger him.
Yennefer would disagree.
Lilac
He
and
has feelings.
gooseberries. Lilac and gooseberries a trigger for him.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, no, I don't know. I think that it probably is something that he's afraid of and insecure about, is at least how I read it. But Yennefer is sort of like, dude, get it together. Why would I be with you if I thought you didn't have feelings? I don't know. I think it's interesting. This is accurate. Geralt having some trauma would be justified. Yeah, I mean, yes, given his background, it would be very justified. Arliss says, I think the author was trying to say that it isn't the man who decides, so both men were painted to be idiots in different ways. I think there is an argument to be made there.
I
I
mean,
love
I
this
do think
also.
that the
Men got a
scene,
men.
excuse me, I do think that that scene was trying to do that, but I was just like,
Mhm.
reading Geralt's character. Like, it didn't really seem super consistent with Geralt's character that he would agree to a duel over Yennefer. You know what I mean?
No, no. It seems strange, but she does make him a little bit
Gooseberry brings all the
nuts.
boys to the yard.
That's a
Yes.
good comment, yes. At least in this series, oh man, that's so funny. Yeah, people kinda, like, l lose their shit over her, it seems like, and I do think it's interesting they're both magical in different ways because he was like, a sorcerer or something, and I I don't know. It's like Yennefer I mean, I guess she she's
Well,
polyamorous. She
but
just can't
so
be contained to one person.
but it's stories like this one, I think, that make people dislike Yennefer, and again, it's not because
Mhm.
she did anything other than, like, have multiple boyfriends. It's the fact that these 2 men are so obsessed with her that they'll fight to the death over her, even though they're not gonna get her. It's and when you're like, "Her?" You're like Arrested Development, you're like, "Her?" I don't get it.
But you know what? People have been doing this forever. Like, is anybody worth fighting to the death like this over?
I mean, I am, but you're right, most are not.
I mean, like, just like either because well, and here's the problem with it is like it's not even the worth thing. It's the if you're fighting to the death over a woman that is taking away her agency
Yeah,
to
I know, but I'm
choose what
saying
she
as to why
wants.
people like, why Yennefer rubs people the wrong way, it's because
Right.
the narrative paints her as this, like, woman that men just lose their minds over, that she's just
Right.
the most covetable female, and people are like, "She's not that great."
But I kind of feel like maybe that's the point because this is a thing that some men do, and the whole point of it is that she's like, "Yeah, no, I am my own person, you can't do." I don't know,
I don't disagree that the narrative is trying to do that. I'm saying, but this is why this gets this kind of reaction. It's not that
I
anyone
guess.
particularly dislikes Yennefer more than other female characters. It's that the
Yeah.
narrative paints her as being better than most female characters, or at least more desirable. And so people are like, well, I wouldn't have been annoyed with her if she was just a character, but you're telling me that every man loses his mind over her? They're like, I'm not losing my mind over her. Like, is the reaction. You know what I mean?
She's like it's like a Helen situation.
Of Troy?
Mhm.
I'm not saying they're right to feel that way. I'm saying that's why it elicits that response. Where like
I
there's other female characters in books that are sexually liberated, that might be
yeah,
selfish, that might be independent, all these things that also apply to Yennefer, Denna, and
right.
Sabitha. The reason these 3 though get the dislike is because the narrative is painting them as, the best. And you're like, well, she can be a character, but if you're telling me she's the best, um, I disagree.
I guess. Part of me feels though like there maybe is an element of misogyny to it sometimes because it could also be, okay, if she's perceived as the best and these men are that into her, she should be worthy of it. She should treat them better or something. I don't know. That's like the vibe I get. Maybe not from everybody, but at least from some people.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's why my response to it always is that I don't I'm not in love with them. I don't need to be. It's about how these men are in love with them, and that's important to their characters. But like I don't not get that in any book, right? Where you're like, there's the book builds and builds and builds to say that like this place is the most beautiful place in the world, or that this song is the most beautiful song in the world, or that
Yeah.
like whatever it is that you're building up and saying that this is the one that like people lose their minds over,
Mhm.
like you're gonna have to pay it off. And that's where on a completely unrelated note, but it's the exact same thing. When I read Daisy Jones and the Six, which I really, really love the book, but there's so many, it's about this rock band that's fictional, but so then we go through all these moments of like, and that song, as soon as people heard it on the radio, everyone like remembered where they were when they heard it, or like, oh, that cover of that magazine, and you can say all that in a book. But I was like, man, if they ever adapt this, they're gonna have to come up with a magazine cover, come up with a song, like come up with things where people actually
Mhm.
agree. Like, yes, this song is all those legendary things that you're telling me that it is. In a book, you can just say that it is. So it's like that
Right.
kind of a thing where like you've promised big. So like Denna, Sabitha, Yennefer,
Mhm.
like you've promised big. Like, okay, you better deliver.
I guess. It's interesting. Although there's this, Arliss agree with this, there's no possible way Helen was all that, but blaming a fight or a war on a woman does seem like misogyny. I mean, yeah, I think exactly. This is kind of how I feel, but um let's see. Geralt could have just trusted Yen. On the other hand, she did spend the morning with the other dude while with Geralt. I mean, yes, but I don't know that she was pretending to be something other than she was. I like she doesn't strike me as somebody who was like, yeah, I'm going to pledge to be in a monogamous relationship.
But if she's not telling people that she's doing this, then it's maybe assuming. You know what I mean? It's still being
Yeah,
deceitful.
yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Because, like, if a man is sleeping around and doesn't tell a woman, like, don't we usually say, hey, he's like, he's being deceitful. He's using her.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's hard to know in the context of this story how long they've been together, and like how much of a ongoing relationship it's been. So I feel like I lack context to know for sure how to talk about it. But yeah, there's okay, we saw that.
But yeah, I mean, like, the narrative certainly doesn't say Yennefer is to blame for this. And it also
Mhm.
doesn't say that Geralt is to blame for this. Like, it just paints a messy situation of adults
Yeah.
being messy with each other. And you're like, all y'all are
Yep.
crazy.
I mean, yeah. Well, and Geralt isn't even that bothered by it. It seems like he's like, all right, well.
I mean, that conversation that Geralt has with what's his face, he will be just what's his face. I'm not going to say his name.
Yeah.
Like, it does seem like Geralt's like, whatever, she can do whatever she wants. And the more this guy's like, no, but she is mine and she knew me before. And Geralt's like, whatever, it's fine. And then he keeps pushing him, and Geralt's like, fine, well, you know what? She was effing me. So maybe I do have a claim. And he's like, oh, but she was actually effing me this morning. So she's actually mine. So it's like they're like egging each other on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Um, so the next story, moving on, is Eternal Flame. And oh, what did I didn't say much about this in my thing. I just said mimic.
That's the one with the guy, the like the shapeshifter that
Yeah. Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was funny.
where we got to see lots of in-universe racism or like speciesism.
Yes. Yeah, we got quite a bit of that, which I thought was interesting the way Geralt responded to that because and this is where we get sort of his take on what is a monster and what's not a monster and a case where there's a conflict between him and what officials think is monstrous. Dodo, yes. That was the mimic.
But as Urza also points out, the story we just moved on from, like that guy was
Mm,
like trying to make Geralt like complicit in his
in his
suicide. And
suicide, that
Geralt
is
was like,
accurate.
go handle your business somewhere else. Don't involve other people in your mess.
Yep. Go Geralt. He just couldn't handle the pain of not being the only one. Like, listen, like, Yen, really, this is the dude you want to string along? Like, okay.
But anyway,
Um,
yeah, moving on.
mhm. Yes. But the mimic was entertaining.
I
It's
feel
interesting
like
that they
the mimic one is it's just a breath of fresh air after how like up their own asses Geralt and what's his face were in the previous story, just like on and on and on about like who gets her and what does it mean, and neither of us can ever have her, and like I must kill myself, and he's like, but like it's just very like
yeah.
it's just very that, and it was just refreshing to be like, here's a shapeshifter, and there's a guy frustrated, he's like, hey, he stole all my money because he took my shape, and it was just like very like if there's an opposite, it was the exact opposite of the previous story.
Yeah. It was I think it was also kind of funny too because it shows how convoluted markets can be, which I kind of enjoyed that it turns from like, "Oh, I spent all this money on all of these things," and yet because of how everything, like, came together, it ended up being a brilliant way to actually make a ton of money, and I like that Geralt's solution to this was to find a way for him to live safely among people. instead of treating him like a monster.
But regarding the markets, like I think it's stuff like that in these books in general that makes the world feel fleshed out and lived in. Where like there's so many like fantasy films, TV shows, and books where it feels
Mhm.
like, well, there is this one market with this one stall and this one merchant because they were needed for this scene, and there
Yes.
is nothing outside of that.
Yeah.
And here, because of like this like brief like slice of the interconnected, super complicated economy, that it feels makes the world feel lived in and real.
Yeah. And, the title of it, Eternal Flame, is what that ties into, right? Because it ends up being like expired oil and string that's going to be used to keep the eternal flame for this religious order going, and they're going to need it because of things happening in the wider economy. Um, so just it was funny. It was interesting though that they take on some of the personality traits of the person that they're mimicking, and then it turns
Well,
out at the
they
end
I was gonna say go ahead. Go ahead.
and then that it turns yeah, and then that it turns out at the end that this wasn't the only one, that they had been slowly infiltrating different positions in the city, these mimics.
I was gonna say, like, it's not just that they have some personality traits, as Geralt makes like abundantly clear when the guy's freaking out. He was like, he is you right now in every way. He's not just like doing a good job imitating you. He is you. He has your memories. He has your thoughts. He has your personality. And that's when the guy's like, well, if he really had been me, then he would have made a great business deal. And it's like, well, he did.
Well, he
It
did.
was you. And so then when we have it turned on Geralt and he turns into Geralt,
Yeah.
and then Geralt's all like, but I'm special. And it's like, you could never actually fully be me. And it's like,
Okay.
okay.
Speaking of Geralt the Snowflake. Yeah. I thought that was funny. I think they did some of that in the show as well, right? Of like Geralt fighting himself, which is kind of entertaining. This one was confusing with all the back and forth merchant stuff, Urza says. Yeah, there was a lot of that. Our list said I love the look into the economy. Same. There's one fruit seller so the protagonist can dramatically crash into watermelons. Exactly, exactly. Uh, yes, Matt. Currently seeking an amorphous blob to handle my personal finances. Same. Sounds like an excellent idea. Let them just take over. And Urza says, I took that to mean you can't mimic the mutations Geralt has. Maybe.
I took that to mean that Geralt is just real special.
That's also very possible. I don't know. But this was a fun one. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, yeah, it was a good breather after the
Mhm.
melodrama of the
Yeah.
previous. Melodrama is the word for the
Yes.
previous one.
There was a lot of
And I think
melodrama.
that's why, yeah, when I said I don't really like Yennefer that much, like I like the fact of her or the witch she represents or the whatever, but like actually having her on page, I don't really like
Mhm.
because it's almost always really melodramatic.
I like melodrama on page, so I don't mind it. I think it's fun.
Like, well, honestly, when most of the characters are like, "Ugh, don't let Geralt talk about Yennefer," I'm like, for real, don't let Geralt talk about Yennefer.
Listen, I love the melodrama. It's great.
I
The
am, in
next
fact, Dandelion out there being like, whatever, just like have a night, go love each other. Who cares?
Who cares? Whatever. Oh man. The next story I thought was fun from a fairy tale perspective. A Little Sacrifice. This was the one with the mermaid.
The way that the narrator sings her
Yeah.
speech
Yeah.
is it's
It
funny.
was it was funny. But I thought this was cool, right? Because it was sort of this, nobody wants to hear the truth. You write a song to move people and kind of subverting like what actually happened with I just thought the whole thing with the mermaid was funny. He's like, "Oh, yes. No, she'll go to land and turn into sea folk," like the Little Mermaid story. And Carol's like, "Why would she do that?" It's like, no.
Yeah, this was the most return to form on fairy tales because it's most similar to The Last Wish.
Yes. Yes.
But we did have some no means yes in it, which was we love to see it.
Mm. Yeah, there's a bit of that. Essie or One Eye was or Blue Eye, was it One Eye or Blue Eye or Big Eye? It was something eye. She had like a big blue eyes and her hair was always in front of one of them. Little Eye. I think it's Little Eye. Let me know. Anyway, um, but I don't know what to think about her. I Dandelion said she was like a little sister, but I got the vibes that secretly Dandelion was maybe actually in love with her. Anybody else get that?
I mean, Dandelion will fuck anything that moves, so I mean, that he's considered it where she's concerned, I'm sure he has.
I mean, yeah. But beyond that, he seemed kind of jealous of her connection with Geralt, I feel like.
I didn't really get that feeling, but maybe.
Okay, maybe. He
I
did
mostly
say he wasn't into her, but I didn't
I
believe
mostly got the
him
sense that
later on. I don't
Dandelion
know.
I mostly feel like Dandelion, like me, is just frustrated with Geralt. And he's
Yeah.
like, just freaking bang her. It's fine. It's really fine.
But then she was like too into him, and Geralt has this moment of being like, "Oh no, is this what Yennefer feels like when I'm like obsessed with her? Shoot."
Yeah, but again, she's like leaning away from him and is like not interested. And it turns out it's because she's too in love with him. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay.
Very
Okay.
she seemed very young, and then of course she has a tragic end to her
Which
story.
I mean, her like this is a step back from feminism. We have a girl who's like leaning away and is like, "Oh no, but it's because I'm too in love with you." And then the end of her, she's like, "I guess he'll have a little sacrifice of like banging me out of pity, and then my future that is just quickly summed up for you is that I die." It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why was that her arc?
Yeah. I I don't know. It was confusing too because the whole little sacrifice theme was also connected to the mermaid, where the dude says he was in love with the mermaid but refused to do anything to sacrifice anything for the sake of that relationship. And so it was a weird
Which I did
dichotomy,
love
right?
Geralt's not accurate translations of what was being said when he was
Yeah,
like,
that was
"Here's
funny.
the gist."
Yeah. Yes. No, but it's like on the one hand, we've got the little sacrifice that's actually that like, well, yes, for love, sometimes you do have to make small sacrifices. But then it's used in this really weird way with Essie and Geralt and stuff, and this idea of like, oh, well, if you just care enough about somebody, love aside, you could sacrifice to make them feel better or something. I don't know. That was weird.
I mean, Geralt being like, "I can sleep with her, just a little sacrifice." And it's just like, "Oh, how noble of you."
I don't know. That was interesting. Um, Jessica said no. It was more like he's known her almost her entire life. Maybe I was the only one getting those vibes from the
I mean,
story, which is fine.
Dandelion is a certified creep, but like not about Essie.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Jessica loved the ending of this one.
I liked the like we write stories and we write songs to like
Mhm,
inspire people and the truth is not really relevant. I
mhm.
just don't understand why Essie already like this like kind of like pathetically treated character through the actual events of the story. Then her end is that she dies miserably. I was just like, was that necessary?
Yeah, I don't know what the deal with that was. She was just a weird character in general, because hadn't it also been the case that she had plagiarized Dandelion's songs? I don't know. It was just there was a lot of weird things happening. But I did like that concept of the truth versus writing songs to move people.
I also loved when the mermaid was like, "Well, he should come and live in the sea if he loves me." And Geralt's like, "He can't
Can't
breathe. He
breathe.
literally can't breathe." And she's like, "Whatever." And he's like, "You're not being reasonable."
Yeah. Neither of them really were, so, Whatever. Um,
It's just like imagining Geralt as your marriage counselor. Because that's kind of he's doing couples counseling there, basically.
kinda, yeah.
And the
Ugh,
guy gets mad at him because he's like, "We were doing just fine when we couldn't understand each other. You had to come here and like make us understand each other, and that
translate.
ruined everything."
Yep. We still have 2 more to talk about, and we're at, like, 49 minutes. Wow, okay. So, the Sword of Destiny, we get introduced to Ciri.
That's the name of the book.
Yeah. The two-edged Sword of Destiny. Um, and we get introduced to the Dryads because that's where she is.
We get introduced to precocious little Ciri with gruff Geralt, which is the best thing in the Witcher series. And
It
I'm so
is
mad the show didn't have that.
it is very adorable. She's funny. Yes. Hey, that's the name of the thing. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I don't I don't know. Thoughts on this? It was interesting the whole thing with the dryads that they have trouble reproducing, so they were taking girls or having girls that were sickly given to them that they somehow changed to make them into dryads.
Yeah, well, the dude being like, "Oh, I have to stay here and help them breed? Oh no. Oh, calamity. I guess I can help out."
How terrible. Yeah, and clearly Geralt has been that down that road before.
Geralt was like, "No, my dude. It's not what you think. It's not gonna be like
It's not gonna be fun.
Shangri-La."
Yeah. Which I think is kind of an interesting reversal to a certain extent. Yes, they stole girls to make them dryads. This is one of the stories that show there isn't any good guys. Yeah, I would agree with that. Certainly not in this story. And yes, the Dryad Queen was kind of scary. Accurate.
And it's a once again an instance of people being like, "This is how it has to be, Geralt."
Hmm.
And he's like, "Nope. Guess what? Nope." They're like,
Hmm.
"It's your destiny. You have to do this. This is how it has to be." And he's like, "Sucks."
And like destiny, what destiny? Yeah. But of course, he's gonna take care of Siri when she needs it. So yeah. We
Siri
get
is
a
so adorable.
little she is cute.
You can't
And
talk to
has
me
like
like that.
this,
I'm a princess.
yeah. She also has, these visions, which I
A
suspect we're gonna get
child
more of.
of the elder blood.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. I love how this whole series is about getting rid of disability by turning girls into other things. I mean, that is kind of true, Jessica. Yeah. Triad breeding farm for the next Readalong. It's like the erotica spinoff of the Witcher series.
There is lots and lots and lots of sexy times in the Witcher books.
Yeah. I
So,
feel like I was gonna
Siri.
say something and I
Thoughts on
lost my
Siri.
train of thought.
Siri is kind of important for the series. So,
Mhm.
initial impressions.
Mm. I mean, I like her, but I think she's gonna be trouble.
She's already trouble.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
She's a princess.
Yeah, that's true.
Nothing but trouble.
But I think she's gonna continue to be trouble. And, I don't know, I think seeing her relationship with Geralt is kind of fun because he's grumpy, but takes care of her. And we also got a little bit of insight maybe into what it takes to become a witcher because that seems to be the possible path for her is and we know that a lot of kids don't don't survive the trials to become a
But
witcher.
girls are never taken to be witchers.
Right. But maybe she will be.
Well, he's got nowhere else to bring her.
Right.
That's home base. But I mean, to be a witcher isn't just to be like living among them and training among them. It's like all um like dangerous elixirs
Mhm.
that are given to them that they may not survive.
Right.
So that is what it is to be a witcher.
Yes. And yes, the trial of the grasses is brutal. They mentioned that a lot of people don't survive it, which I think is which I guess we find out more in the last story, something more where um Ciri's grandmother is scared and doesn't want that to happen to her,
Well, in general, I mean, from the first
which
time we
makes
saw
sense.
when we saw Queen Calanthe in the Last Wish, she was like, "No, we're not doing this. We're not doing any of what you say. I don't care what." I
Mhm.
mean, she's kind of like Geralt in that. She's like, "Screw fate, screw destiny, screw promises. I say
Yep.
no to all of this." And so, I mean, in that sense, she and Geralt got along because even in this story, she's like, "You've come here to claim what's yours finally,"
Mhm.
and Geralt's like, "You could just ask me to not." And honestly, I would not. And she's like, "I have to ask," and he's like, "I'm just saying, I'm not interested, okay?"
Yeah. Well, and the other note I had here that I thought was really interesting from that last story is the information
So
we
we're
get
moving
about.
on then from Sword of Destiny.
I mean, did you have I don't know. I mean, we can talk about both. I feel like they kind of go together a bit because 'cause they're the 2
All the
that deal with
stories
Ciri.
together. They're
Well,
all
I guess so.
The Witcher.
Okay. Plus, we're close to an hour, so,
I
Um,
mean, that we should talk about Geralt's mother.
that's what I was about to say, yes, is Geralt's mother. That was a big which they haven't touched on that in the show, I don't think. At least
They
that
did.
I did they?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I just missed it. But I thought it was so interesting that she's a sorceress who are supposed to be infertile. So how did his mother have a baby? Also, I feel like my big question is does Yennefer know that Geralt's mother was a sorceress? And if
Well,
so,
also earlier in the book, someone says something about when they're about sorceresses being infertile, and Geralt's like, "Well, I know for a fact that they aren't all infertile." And then later, at the end of the book, is when we see his mother, which is
yeah,
another one of those like you know to look for it because it's told out of order.
yeah. Yeah, so I'm just curious why his mother isn't and who his father was and what I want more information. But that
Well,
was really
also, like,
interesting.
when he's like, "You just abandoned me, and, like, nothing of mine is even yours, like, you gave me to these dudes who gave me my name and my life," and
Mhm.
she's like, "They didn't give you your name. I give you your name.
Yeah.
But you won't remember this conversation come the morning."
Oh, man. Yeah. I just want to know more is basically that story left me with questions. I
The entire Witcher series is about fate and destiny.
mm,
So we've heard it mentioned here and there,
here and there.
especially here.
Yes. Yes.
Child of the Elder Blood, the Sword of Destiny.
Mhm.
Geralt, she is your destiny.
Yes.
Also,
Um,
the fact that there was that like sort of prophetic moment with like Geralt and Yennefer were made for each other, but nothing will come of it.
okay. Yeah. Urza says the big part for me in this last one is the memorial on Sodden Hill. I don't remember this. I just read this recently. Why is this not?
Well, I don't think it
What was
stands out
this?
unless you know the story. So
Okay.
like, yeah.
Okay. All right. Any final thoughts before we move on to on my radar?
Just looking forward to the main series up until the end of it.
Mm. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading the first full length novel. It'll be interesting.
What
Not
else?
next month though, for anybody wondering. We are taking a break for March and then we'll pick back up in April. And actually the episode we're doing at the end of March is not going to be book related. I know. We're going to be talking about a television show, which should be fun. We're going to talk about Andor, the Star Wars show on Disney Plus. And we have a guest coming, so it'll be fun.
Have you seen Young Frankenstein?
Part of it,
The Mel Brooks movie?
not the whole thing.
Just all this talk about destiny and Geralt refusing it always makes me think of the scene in Young Frankenstein when he's like in bed and having a nightmare and he's like rolling like around like terrified of his nightmare going, destiny, destiny, no escaping that for me, destiny, destiny. And like Frankenstein has like white hair and he looks kind of cuckoo. It's totally Geralt.
Yep. Urza, yes, you should definitely watch Andor. You have time. You have until the last Tuesday of
It's the Game of
March.
Thrones of Star Wars.
It's so good. It's not boring, and it has interesting politics and
like
characters.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I have not that I've seen Game of Thrones, but yes, exactly. So go watch Andor if you want to join in. It'll be fun. But our direct next episode is going to be talking about Persuasion by Jane Austen, the book, and the Netflix adaptation. And we will also have a guest for that. So that'll be me and Izzy, maybe Leanna, to be determined, and then another guest. So it should be fun. Is it also fantasy as it ought to be written?
Well, sure.
Okay. It's a good show though. I liked it. So we're gonna move into on my radar, where we'll talk about recent and upcoming releases in science fiction and fantasy. I don't know if Leanna has anything for this, but I have lots. But if you enjoy the podcast, we would appreciate if you take a moment to rate and review us so we can continue to reach more listeners. And if you're interested in getting early access to episodes as well as exclusive bonus content with every episode, consider supporting us on Patreon and toss a coin to your hosts. Did it twice. See,
We
thank
need
you to
to
all
like
of our
rewrite the
supporting
entire
patrons.
song, but reword it with Patreon words and then
That would
perform it.
be excellent. Maybe we could do it as like our intro video for
Get one of those poofy
patrons.
hats like Dandelion has.
Love it, love it. Thank you though to all of our supporting patrons, including our world expanding patrons, Trina and Stephanie. You all make what we do possible. Thank you so much. And we mentioned the bonus content. We'll be talking about
Monsters and monstrousness.
monsters and monstrousness. I didn't write it down, and my brain is like, it's 10 o'clock at night. Okay. Okay, so I do have books that are coming out this month or recently that I'm excited about. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chokshi has been a polarizing one. I really, really loved it. It is her first adult novel, and it is a gothic sort of fairy tale fantasy thing. It's loosely a gender flipped retelling of Bluebeard, but also doing some other things. I loved it, but it is a lot of vibes. Like lots of vibes and atmosphere, but I was a fan. Also, we have A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon, which is a prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, and it looks like a behemoth of a book, but I really liked Priory of the Orange Tree, and I want to
Priory was so
read more.
short, so you can see why
So
she'd really want
short.
to expand on it.
Yeah. I think this one might be even longer than Priory, which is saying something because, yeah. Also, The Cage of Dark Hours by Marina Lostetter is the second book in a fantasy series that's kind of like murder mystery plus fantasy in another world. And the second book is interesting because it has a cult that kidnaps children and raises them in abusive ways for magic reasons. So it's interesting.
So it's the dryads.
Yeah, it is a little bit, but worse than the triads. Oh no, Jessica, Priory can kick all the rocks. I loved Priory, but I know you were not a fan. It's okay. Delicious Monsters by Lizelle Sambury came out today. It is a upper YA horror novel that I really liked. It's also got a bit of gothic vibes. There's a haunted estate
Is
in northern
upper YA a
Canada.
category between YA and new adult?
I'm eh, New adult is not technically a thing. When I say upper YA, it's YA, but it's for older, like 16, 17 and up, not 13, 14.
How granular can we get with our categories?
They do this though, if you look at it, it'll tell you the recommended age range, and there are YA books that have higher recommended ages. So this one it's a more intense one, but I was a fan of it. And there's like so many books coming out. I Yeah. The Adventures of Amina El-Sarafi by S.A. Chakraborty,
That's my
also
book
very
of the
good.
month.
Yeah. Did you get it? Oh, I'm excited
That's
to
what
see
I
what you
think,
think.
yeah.
Cool.
I am dreading it a little bit because I didn't like City of Brass.
It's
We
pretty
shall see.
different from City of Brass. It's got like a middle-aged mother who had retired from being a smuggler who, for reasons to protect her daughter, has to go back out on the seas again, the high seas, and discovers that the not human ex-husband who she thought was dead is not actually dead. They have a very complicated relationship. It was fun, and it's drawing on Middle Eastern history. It's a pretty good time. So, yeah. And then I guess the last one I'll mention is The Crane Husband by Kelly Barnhill, which is a retelling of The Crane Wife. It's a novella that is dealing with domestic violence, but through the eyes of the teen daughter of her. She's watching her mom become the victim of domestic abuse, but then with this sort of fairy tale magical realism overlay. Also quite dark, but good. So, yeah, lots of things. Go check them out. They're all linked either below in the video description or in the show notes. Thank you for joining us, and I will be back March 14th to discuss Persuasion with Izzy, maybe Leanna, and also Alexa Dunn is going to be joining us as well. So I think it'll be fun. Again, this has been Chapter 3 Podcast. We're your hosts, Bethany and Leanna. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Chapter 3 Podcast. And you can find us on our individual YouTube channels. And yeah, we'll be back March 14th with Persuasion. And this episode's bonus content will be available to patrons in the next few days. Thanks for listening.